Welcome to the Riddles and Secrets of History channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new stories. The Bermuda Triangle is a stretch of the Atlantic Ocean shrouded in mysteries that have captured the attention of maritime researchers, sailors, and curious minds for over 100 years. Numerous ships and aircraft have vanished here over the last 2 centuries, giving rise to many myths, from tales of supernatural forces to hypotheses about natural anomalies. Vessels would disappear without distress signals, planes would vanish mid-air without a trace of wreckage, and expeditions sent in search of them would return empty-handed. These events inspired fantastic stories, but behind them lie real incidents that require careful analysis. Today, we will approach this topic from a scientific perspective, examine key cases, separate fact from fiction, and try to understand what is happening in this enigmatic corner of the planet. Our investigation is based on archives, eyewitness testimonies, and collected data. We will look at episodes where technology failed in clear weather, communication was lost for no apparent reason, and crews disappeared without leaving any clues about their fate. These stories have often been embellished with fictional details, but we will focus on the facts to get to the heart of the matter. We'll start with the first mentions of missing vessels, trace the development of this mystery through the 20th century, and turn to modern attempts to explain what is happening. Each case is an opportunity to test what natural forces, human errors, or other factors might have played a role. We will move forward, layer by layer, uncovering what lies in the depths of the triangle and seeking answers where speculation has long overshadowed the truth. To grasp the scale, let's define the region's boundaries. The Bermuda Triangle lies in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, connecting Miami in Florida, the Bermuda Islands, and San Juan in Puerto Rico. Its area reaches 1.5 million square kilometers, a space comparable to France and Germany combined, or almost half the Caspian Sea. For centuries, these waters have served as an important crossroads. Trade routes connected the New World with the Old, airplanes crossed continents, and seafarers charted courses through this bustling area. Marine and air traffic flourished here, but it was also here that events unfolded that made the triangle a symbol of the inexplicable. Legends about it grew with each new disappearance, blending reality with fantasy. We will delve into this chronicle to study the authentic incidents, understand their causes, and discover what lies behind one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. This journey begins with a clean slate, and a world full of discoveries and reflections awaits us. The first pages in the history of the Bermuda Triangle's mysteries open in the 19th century, when this part of the Atlantic began to be surrounded by stories that went beyond the ordinary. One such episode was the encounter of the British ship Ellen Austin with a drifting schooner in 1881, a case full of details that turned it into a maritime legend. The Ellen Austin was crossing the Atlantic, following a route through the area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. It was a Victorian-era merchant vessel, a wooden hull reinforced with iron brackets, tall masts with taut sails, and a crew of seasoned sailors accustomed to the ocean's whims. The day it all happened began like any other. The sun was high, reflecting on the calm water. A light breeze pushed the ship forward, and the horizon seemed endless. At some point, a schooner appeared ahead, a small vessel drifting without any signs of life. Its sails hung as if untouched for a long time, the masts swayed gently on the waves, and the deck looked deserted, as if the crew had vanished into thin air. For sailors of that time, such a find was not entirely out of the ordinary. Ships were often left without a crew due to storms, pirate raids, or outbreaks of diseases like cholera that claimed lives at sea. Such a vessel could be a prize for its finders, a way to help those in distress, or an opportunity to earn money by towing it to port. The captain of the Ellen Austin decided to follow maritime tradition and send men aboard. Several sailors lowered a boat and headed for the schooner. The waves lapped gently against the hull as they climbed the rope ladder onto the deck of this mysterious vessel. An inspection revealed that the schooner was in excellent condition. The hold contained cargo, perhaps bags of wool, crates of tobacco, or barrels of rum, neatly stacked and secured with ropes as if just checked before departure. Although the sails were hanging, they were intact, the rigging was not torn, and the rudder turned with a slight creak but without resistance. In the cabins, there were traces of human presence, a worn book open to the middle, a woolen cloak, a copper pipe with tobacco remnants on a table next to a pewter mug. There were no signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, no broken planks, and no evidence of flooding. The schooner looked as though its crew had abandoned it willingly, without haste, leaving everything as it was. The sailors remained on board to get the schooner moving and follow their ship. The task seemed simple: raise the sails, take control, and escort the find to the nearest port, where it could be handed over to the authorities or sold for a reward. Until that moment, the weather had remained favorable, with a light wind and a clear sky. However, soon everything changed. Clouds began to gather, the wind picked up, and a storm was approaching. The waves grew, crashing over the sides, and the two vessels temporarily lost sight of each other amidst the sheets of rain and flashes of lightning. The storm lasted for several hours. Water flooded the deck, the wind howled in the rigging, and the horizon disappeared behind a gray curtain. When the storm finally subsided, the Ellen Austin returned to its previous location to find its men and the schooner. But there was nothing there. The schooner had vanished as if dissolved in the ocean, and with it, the sailors sent aboard were gone. The crew scanned the surrounding waters, looked through spyglasses, listened to the silence, and moved slowly in circles, hoping to spot something. There was no wreckage, no lifeboats, no hint that a ship with people had recently been there. The sea lay before them, smooth and empty, as if the storm had swept everything clean. This incident became one of the first oddities associated with the region that would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. The story of the Ellen Austin began to spread much later, when a newspaper wrote about it in 1940. The account was based on oral maritime legends passed down through generations, but no documentary evidence, ship's logs, official reports, or eyewitness records has survived. Everything that has come down to us is based on this publication, which may have embellished the events for reader interest. The subsequent cases, like that of the Mary Celeste, would add new layers to this chain of inexplicable encounters in the same waters. The Mary Celeste left New York in November 1872, bound for Genoa. It was a two-masted brigantine built in Canada with a crew of 10, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 sailors. The hold contained barrels of denatured alcohol for Italian customers. The voyage began in clear weather with a favorable wind, and everything seemed like a typical ocean crossing. On December 4th, the British vessel Dei Grazia, sailing from New York to Gibraltar, discovered the Mary Celeste hundreds of miles from the Azores, near the borders of what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. Captain David Morehouse, who knew Briggs personally, noticed that the brigantine was moving erratically. The sails were half-raised, and the rudder was swinging freely. Signals went unanswered, and Morehouse sent 3 sailors in a lifeboat to inspect the vessel. Upon boarding, they found it empty. The crew had vanished, but the ship remained in good condition. The barrels of cargo were in the hold, one was broken, but the rest were intact. The sails and masts were sound, and the hull had no damage. In the captain's cabin lay navigational instruments, a chart marked on November 25th, Sarah's sewing machine, and their daughter's toys. The sailors' bunks were made, and their chests with clothes and tobacco were untouched. The ship's log ended with an entry on November 25th, giving the coordinates of Santa Maria Island. The lifeboat was missing, and its ropes were cut cleanly. The compass was broken. About a meter of water was found in the hold, but this was not a threat to the vessel, and the pumps were working. Food, money, and valuables were all in their places. The Dei Grazia brought the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, where an investigation began. British authorities inspected the ship and questioned Morehouse's crew but found no signs of violence or disease. The alcohol in the barrels was deemed safe. The case spread through the newspapers, adding to the region's notoriety. The story of the Mary Celeste is preserved in the official investigation documents from Gibraltar and in publications from the British press of 1872, such as The Times. These sources are credible as they are based on crew testimony and official inspection. However, the absence of witnesses from the Mary Celeste leaves gaps. The investigation did not determine the exact reason for the crew's departure, and explanations vary. Some suggest panic due to alcohol fumes, which is refuted by analysis. Others point to a storm, although meteorological data shows the weather was calm. A third theory suggests the crew abandoned ship in the lifeboat for fear of sinking due to the water in the hold, although the level was not critical. This version, involving a mistaken fear of sinking, is considered the most plausible, given the disassembled pump and the absence of other threats. Ahead lies the story of the Cyclops, whose fate in the 20th century will reveal new facets of these mysterious disappearances. In 1918, at the height of World War I, the American collier USS Cyclops added a new chapter to the chronicle of disappearances in these waters. This vessel, unlike the sailing ships of the past, was a massive steel steamship, but its disappearance proved just as inexplicable. The Cyclops belonged to the United States Navy and was used to transport coal and ore. It was a 165-meter-long steamship with a crew and passengers totaling 309 people, including sailors, officers, and several civilians, one of whom was the U.S. consul to Rio de Janeiro. On March 4, 1918, the ship left the port of Barbados, heading for Baltimore. Its cargo consisted of manganese ore, a heavy material for the steel industry, vital in wartime. The weather that day was favorable, with a light wind and a clear sky, and the ship was in good condition after a recent inspection in port. The Cyclops was last seen off Barbados as it left the harbor. Radio communication was maintained during the first days of the voyage but then ceased. No distress signals were received, and there were no reports of problems with the engines, cargo, or weather. The ship vanished somewhere between Barbados and the U.S. East Coast, in the Bermuda Triangle zone. Search operations began when the Cyclops failed to arrive in Baltimore by its due date, March 13. The Navy dispatched ships and aircraft to survey the route, but no trace of the ship or the 309 people on board was ever found. The ocean remained empty, as if the vessel had dissolved into its vastness. The investigation organized by the U.S. Navy faced a complete lack of evidence. The Cyclops was a reliable ship, built in 1911, under the command of Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley, an experienced officer, although his German origins later sparked rumors of sabotage, which were never substantiated by facts. The weather in March 1918 along its route was stable, with no major storms, according to meteorological records. The manganese ore cargo was considered stable, and overloading was ruled out based on previous voyages. The story of the Cyclops is preserved in official U.S. Navy reports and American press publications from 1918, such as the New York Times. These materials rely on Navy data and testimony from Barbados, but the absence of wreckage or radio messages leaves many mysteries. Explanations vary. Some point to a sudden storm not reflected in weather records. Others suggest an attack by a German submarine, although enemy activity in that area was not recorded. Still others mention cargo instability or engine failure. The investigation did not establish a precise cause, and no single hypothesis has been convincingly proven. The most plausible version is considered to be a hidden structural failure, possibly a hull fracture under the weight of the ore, which could have led to a rapid sinking. Cases like the Cyclops, which disappeared in 1918, left behind a trail of mysteries that found no explanation. Every such incident, from the sailing ships of the 19th century to the steel vessels of the 20th, became an enigma surrounded by speculation. The waters of the Atlantic held these stories, and a myth gradually grew around them. The fate of the Cyclops in 1918 left us with the mystery of a vanished steel giant. But the story of the Atlantic secrets is not limited to individual cases. It grows into something larger, a legend that spans centuries and continents. Stories of lost ships in these waters began to form as early as the 19th century when seafaring connected the world with trade arteries. Sailors of that time shared tales of ships disappearing without a trace, passing them from mouth to mouth in port taverns. Some even recalled the records of Christopher Columbus, who in 1492 allegedly saw strange lights and compass malfunctions near the Bahamas. St. Elmo's fire is an electrical discharge that occurs on masts and rigging during thunderstorms. It is mentioned in his diaries as a natural phenomenon, but it is not linked to disappearances, and the stories about Columbus remain a myth. These rumors, born from the episodes we have examined, remained scattered until the 20th century breathed new life into them, connecting old legends with modern disappearances. It was this myth that Vincent Gaddis shaped into a clear picture, giving it a name known to the whole world. As technology advanced and reports of disappearances grew louder, these stories began to attract attention beyond maritime circles. By the 20th century, cases of disappearances were accumulating, especially in the western Atlantic, where routes between America, Europe, and the Caribbean intersected most frequently. The press seized on every incident, adding details and speculation, which heightened public interest. However, the real turning point came later when one man managed to unite these scattered tales into a single narrative, giving them a name that would forever be etched in the minds of millions. In 1964, American writer Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine, a popular pulp publication that specialized in sensationalism, adventure, and unusual phenomena. The article was titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle and was the first to introduce this term into wide circulation. Gaddis brought together cases like the Mary Celeste, the Cyclops, and others that had been discussed for decades, describing the area between Miami, Bermuda, and San Juan as a place where inexplicable disappearances occur. He drew on archival data, newspaper clippings, and maritime reports, adding a dramatic style that captivated readers. In the article, he explained the disappearances with a mix of science and fantasy. He mentioned magnetic anomalies, referencing old tales of compass malfunctions, though he provided no concrete evidence. He spoke of unusual weather phenomena, like sudden storms, and hinted at underwater currents capable of pulling ships down. In some places, he allowed for the intervention of extraterrestrial forces or mysterious energies, which particularly intrigued the public. The publication in Argosy, with a circulation in the hundreds of thousands, sparked a wave of interest. Readers, fascinated by the idea of a mysterious patch of ocean, began discussing it in letters, conversations, and even in other publications. Gaddis didn't invent these stories, he merely gave them a form, a name, and a map, turning scattered events into a unified legend. His work inspired books, articles, and investigations, and the term Bermuda Triangle quickly spread beyond the United States. By the 1970s, the idea had become part of mass culture, fueling curiosity about past cases and new incidents. He expanded on the theme in his 1965 book, Invisible Horizons, where he added more cases and speculations, solidifying the image of the triangle as an enigmatic phenomenon. The story of Gaddis and his Argosy article is preserved in the original issues of the magazine and in the author's subsequent publications, including the book Invisible Horizons, 1965. These materials are based on real events, but their questionable format and Gaddis's tendency for exaggeration, such as hinting at the supernatural without proof, cast doubt on their scientific rigor, a fact confirmed by comparison with archival records. Thus was born the legend that united 19th-century rumors with 20th-century disappearances, creating the phenomenon we still talk about today. By the mid-20th century, these waters had become the scene not only for disappearing ships but also for vanishing aircraft, expanding the boundaries of the mystery into the age of aviation. One of the most famous cases that solidified this reputation was Flight 19 in 1945. 5 U.S. Navy bombers and a rescue plane sent to help them dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only fragments of radio transmissions and new questions that still trouble minds today. On December 5, 1945, 5 Avenger torpedo bombers took off from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a training flight led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a pilot with 2,500 flight hours and a veteran of World War II. On board were 14 men, Taylor and 13 cadets and instructors practicing navigation and bombing runs over the ocean. The mission was standard: fly to the reef, drop practice bombs, and return via the Bahamas. The route passed through the zone between Florida, Bermuda, and the Bahamas, an area already known for its oddities. The weather that day was clear, with a light wind and good visibility, promising a smooth flight. Takeoff was at 2 p.m., and the group headed for the reef. An hour and a half later, troubling radio messages began coming from the base. Taylor transmitted, "Both my compasses are out. I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land, but it's broken." His voice sounded confused, which was unusual for an experienced pilot. One of the cadets added, "We are flying east, but we should be flying west," indicating a deviation from the course. Then Taylor reported, "The ocean looks strange. It doesn't look like it should." The communications became more chaotic. The pilots spoke of losing their bearings, even though the sun was still shining. At 4:25 p.m., another message was recorded, "We are entering white water. We're completely lost." White water is a term usually meaning foamy waves, but in clear weather, this sounded inexplicable and remains a mystery. After that, communication was lost. These messages are confirmed by base recordings, although interference and overlapping voices distorted some phrases. The base responded instantly. At 6:20 p.m., a Martin Mariner seaplane with 13 men took off to search. It was a vessel designed for rescue operations with enough fuel for long hours. 20 minutes later, the Mariner reported entering the search area, but soon, communication was lost. That same evening, the Navy launched a massive operation. More than 20 ships and 250 aircraft surveyed an area of 300,000 square miles, including the Bahamas and the Gulf Stream. The search continued for 5 days, but no trace of the 27 men was found. The U.S. Navy investigation began the next day. They checked the communication logs, the condition of the aircraft, and the weather. The Avengers were in good condition before takeoff with full fuel tanks. Taylor was suspected of making an error. He might have mistaken the Bahamas for Florida and led the group into the open ocean, but the failure of compasses on all the planes remained unexplained. The Martin Mariner could have exploded due to fuel vapors. The merchant ship SS Gaines Mills reported seeing a flash in the sky at 6:30 p.m., but no evidence was found. The weather remained stable, without storms. Radio amateurs in Miami intercepted signals. One claimed to have heard the phrase, "Looks like we're over the Gulf of Mexico," but this was never confirmed. The case gave rise to numerous theories. Officially, the Navy was inclined to believe that the Avengers got lost due to compass failure, headed east, ran out of fuel, and the Martin Mariner exploded. However, the triangle's popularity fueled rumors. In the 1950s, newspapers wrote that the mission might have been a secret test of a new weapon or a reconnaissance flight over the Caribbean, although Navy documents only confirm it was a training exercise. Other theories included alien abduction. The white water was interpreted as the wake of an alien ship or a portal. There were also suggestions of temporal anomalies that carried the planes into another dimension, fueled by fantasies after Gaddis's article. These ideas had no evidence but were widely discussed in the press and books. This incident was just the beginning of a series of aviation disappearances. 3 years later, in 1948, a Douglas DC-3 passenger plane vanished in the same waters, leaving only a brief radio message and 32 people without a trace. This story adds a new layer to the chronicle of the unexplained, taking us deeper into the aviation era. On December 28, 1948, a Douglas DC-3 took off from San Juan, heading to Miami, Florida. It was a charter flight by the airline Airborne Transport, carrying 29 passengers, mostly Puerto Ricans returning home after the holidays, and 3 crew members commanded by Captain Robert Lindquist. The plane left San Juan at 10 p.m. local time with enough fuel for a 5-hour flight. The weather remained favorable, a clear sky, light wind, and good visibility, ideal conditions for a 400-mile night flight over the ocean. The flight proceeded smoothly until midnight when the DC-3 contacted controllers in Miami. Lindquist transmitted, "We are 50 miles south of Miami. All's well." This was the last message. After that, communication ceased. There were no distress signals, no hints of trouble. When the DC-3 failed to land at its scheduled time, around 2 a.m. on December 29, controllers raised the alarm. The search operation began at dawn. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard dispatched ships and planes to survey the route. The area covered thousands of square miles, including the waters along the Bahamas and the Gulf Stream. Rescuers looked for wreckage, life rafts, or oil slicks but found nothing. The search continued for several days, but no trace of the 32 people was ever found. The ocean fell silent once again, hiding another secret. The investigation, conducted by the Civil Aeronautics Administration, faced a lack of evidence. The plane had been inspected in San Juan, the engines were working, and fuel levels were normal. Lindquist was considered an experienced pilot, and his co-pilot and flight engineer also had good reputations. The weather that night remained stable, with no storms or turbulence, according to weather reports from Miami and San Juan. The radio equipment was checked before takeoff and was functioning properly. The only clue was the message "all's well," but it indicated no problems, yet communication was lost shortly after. The case spawned various theories. Officially, a malfunction was suspected, possibly engine failure or a fire, although the absence of a distress signal contradicted this. Some pointed to human error, a navigational mistake by the pilot, but the route was simple and the night was clear. Soon, rumors fueled by the Triangle's fame emerged. There was talk of magnetic anomalies throwing off the instruments or a sudden storm not recorded by weather stations. In the 1950s press, theories of alien abduction arose, linking it to Flight 19, but again, there was no proof. The story of the Douglas DC-3 is preserved in the reports of the Civil Aeronautics Administration and newspapers from 1948. These materials are based on dispatcher testimony and search data, but the lack of wreckage leaves questions open. The most plausible version is considered to be a technical malfunction leading to a rapid catastrophe, but the exact cause was never determined. The last of the mysterious disappearances we will examine is the boat Witchcraft, which vanished in 1967. This incident occurred almost 2 decades after the Douglas DC-3, carrying the Atlantic's mystery into the era of modern technology. It stands out for its proximity to the shore and the speed with which the vessel disappeared, leaving only silence where voices had been heard just moments before. On December 22, 1967, the yacht Witchcraft departed from Miami, Florida. It was a small 7-meter vessel owned by Dan Burek, a local hotel owner and boating enthusiast. On board were Burek himself and his friend, Father Patrick Horgan. They planned a short trip along the coast to admire Miami's Christmas lights from the water. The yacht left the marina around 7 p.m., heading for buoy number 7, a mile from shore. At 9 p.m., the Coast Guard received a call from the Witchcraft. Burek reported, "We have a problem. We struck something. We need a tow." His voice was calm, without panic, suggesting a minor issue, perhaps the propeller had hit a reef or debris. He specified his location at buoy number 7 and requested a tow. The dispatcher confirmed that help would arrive in 20 minutes and asked Burek to fire a flare to aid the search. Burek agreed, and the communication ended. The Coast Guard arrived at the buoy at 9:19 p.m., just 19 minutes after the call. The sea was calm, visibility was good, and the lights of Miami glowed in the distance. However, the yacht was gone. There was no trace of the Witchcraft, Burek, or Horgan. Rescuers surveyed the area, looking for a flare, wreckage, or fuel slicks, but found nothing. The search was expanded to 200 miles along the coast, involving Navy ships and aircraft. The operation lasted for several days, but neither the yacht nor its passengers were found. A vessel just a mile from shore had vanished in a matter of minutes. The Coast Guard investigation was met with a void. The Witchcraft was in excellent condition, recently inspected, and equipped with an inflatable life raft and life jackets, which Burek had not had time to use. Buoy number 7 was in shallow water, about 5 meters deep, where sinking was unlikely without a severe storm, and the weather remained clear. The radio was working, and the signal was clear, ruling out communication failure. Witnesses on shore had seen the yacht's lights until 9 p.m., but they disappeared after the call. No reefs or obstacles were recorded in that area, although Burek mentioned a collision. The case generated different theories. The Coast Guard speculated that the yacht might have sunk due to a hidden hull breach, but the lack of debris undermined this. Local sailors spoke of a strong current that could have swept the vessel into the Gulf Stream, though its speed couldn't explain a disappearance in 19 minutes. Other rumors included alien abduction or a sudden whirlpool, but there was no evidence. In the 1960s press, a connection to Flight 19 was discussed, enhancing the mystique. The most plausible version remains a rapid mechanical failure and sinking, possibly due to a collision with an unseen object, but the exact cause was never established. Scientific explanations. For centuries, disappearances in the Atlantic have left humanity facing the inexplicable, prompting a search for causes hidden within the nature of these waters. The Bermuda Triangle, site of numerous ship and plane disappearances, has become a place where science attempts to solve the mystery. Among the fact-based hypotheses, magnetic anomalies stand out. This phenomenon is related to peculiarities of the Earth's geomagnetic field that can affect navigation in this region. The Earth is surrounded by a magnetic field created by the movement of molten iron in its core. This field directs compass needles to magnetic north, helping sailors and pilots determine their course. However, the field is not uniform everywhere. In some places, it is distorted by geological structures or changes in its lines of force. In the zone known as the Bermuda Triangle, a unique situation occurs. Here, true north, the geographic point where meridians converge, and magnetic north, determined by the field, are closer to each other than in many other parts of the planet. This creates a zone where compasses can deviate from their expected direction. Scientists have recorded that in this area, the difference between true and magnetic north can reach 10 to 15 degrees. For an unprepared person relying solely on a compass, this deviation could lead a ship or plane hundreds of miles off course. Historically, sailors noted such failures in the western Atlantic as early as the 19th century. Modern geophysical research confirms the existence of such anomalies, linking them to underwater structures. However, these anomalies themselves are not destructive, they only affect navigation. With the advent of gyroscopes and satellite systems in the 20th century, their impact became less significant. But for older vessels and aircraft, it could have been a serious threat. Methane gas eruptions. The next hypothesis takes us beneath the ocean's surface to methane eruptions, a natural process capable of abruptly changing sea conditions. Methane forms deep in the sedimentary layers of the ocean floor, where organic remains decompose without oxygen. Under pressure, this gas turns into clathrates, frozen ice-like structures. In the western Atlantic, such deposits are found in shallow areas and along the continental shelf. When temperature or pressure changes, the clathrates can destabilize, releasing gas bubbles that rise rapidly to the surface. For ships, this creates a grave danger. Water saturated with methane bubbles loses its density. A vessel in such a zone loses buoyancy and can sink in seconds, without time to send a distress signal. For aircraft, the gas rising into the atmosphere can alter its composition. An engine that ingests a mixture with a high methane content could stall. Geologists have confirmed the presence of clathrates in the region and have found craters on the seabed, evidence of past gas blowouts. This hypothesis explains how vessels could disappear without a trace but depends on a rare coincidence: the eruption must occur directly beneath a passing object. Rogue waves. Water wave. Among other forces are rogue waves, nicknamed killer waves by sailors, which can rise up to 30 meters, almost equals 100 feet. These waves occur when winds and currents converge at a single point, reinforcing each other. They are 2 to 3 times higher than typical storm waves and appear suddenly. For a long time, they were considered a myth until a 25-meter wave was recorded by satellite off the coast of Norway in 1995. In the western Atlantic, the clash of warm and cold currents creates conditions where such waves are more frequent. Survivors describe them as overwhelming walls of water capable of breaking ships apart or pulling them under, leaving little debris. The Gulf Stream current dashing away. But even after such impacts, the question remains: where does the evidence go? The answer may lie in the Gulf Stream, a powerful current that moves at speeds of up to 8 km per hour, 5 miles per hour, carrying away everything that falls into its path. The Gulf Stream originates in the Gulf of Mexico and flows along the eastern edge of North America. Its speed and volume make it one of the strongest currents in the world. When a ship or plane crashes, the Gulf Stream interferes with search efforts. Debris, life rafts, or fuel slicks are caught by this current and carried for dozens of kilometers within hours. This makes rescue operations extremely difficult, as by the time teams arrive, any evidence is already far away or has been pulled deeper by eddies. Finally, the disasters themselves often begin with forces acting above the water. Weather factors like hurricanes and microbursts bring us to the atmosphere, where wind and pressure create conditions capable of destroying ships and planes. Hurricanes are giant cyclones born over the warm Atlantic waters. Their winds can exceed 118 kilometers per hour, 74 miles per hour, sinking ships and downing low-flying aircraft. Microbursts are a different threat, smaller in scale but no less treacherous. They occur in thunderclouds when a column of cold air rapidly descends, hitting the surface at speeds up to 160 km per hour, 100 miles per hour. The force of the wind can capsize boats or tear the wings off aircraft. Weather archives from the region contain numerous examples of fishing boats and yachts sinking from a sudden blast of wind, even when no major storm was in the forecast. For aviation, microbursts are particularly dangerous due to abrupt wind shifts. Pilots entering such a zone during takeoff or landing face a sudden loss of altitude. In the 1980s, meteorologists began to record these phenomena using radar, discovering their frequency during the warm months along the Atlantic coast. Hurricanes, on the other hand, leave a wider trail. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew passed through Florida, destroying dozens of ships and ports and damaging low-flying rescue helicopters. Data on these phenomena are collected in the archives of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) and meteorological stations in the Caribbean region. They are based on radar readings, eyewitness accounts, and weather reports from the mid-20th century. However, the weather in this region holds more subtle phenomena, visible only from above. Hexagonal clouds, discovered in NASA data, lead us to turbulent zones over the ocean where unusual structures in the sky can create dangerous conditions for those below. This idea is based on observations from space, revealing the hidden dynamics of the atmosphere over this corner of the planet. Hexagonal clouds are unusual formations that stand out with clear, honeycomb-like borders. They form when cold air descends into warmer layers over the water, creating convection cells. Unlike chaotic thunderclouds, these structures take on a geometric shape due to the uniform distribution of air currents. NASA has recorded such clouds over the western Atlantic using the TERRA satellite and its MODIS instrument. In 1992, images showed them over the Bahamas, with sizes ranging from 30 to 80 kilometers in diameter. These clouds are associated with turbulence that can reach the surface. Meteorologists suggest they form downdrafts, so-called microbursts, but on a smaller scale than in thunderstorms. NASA data from 1992 showed that such currents can generate winds up to 160 km per hour, 100 miles per hour, hitting the ocean and raising waves up to 14 meters, 45 feet. For ships, such conditions pose a threat. Sudden gusts of wind can capsize boats or blow them off course. Airplanes, especially at low altitudes, face sharp wind shears that disrupt control. The hexagonal cloud hypothesis is based on NASA satellite data and meteorological observations since the early 1990s, showing how these geometric clouds can amplify local turbulence. Pseudoscientific and paranormal theories. Well, friends, we have finally reached the part you most likely tuned in for, the pseudoscientific show with a touch of fantasy, where logic gives way to a stream of imagination. The hexagonal clouds left us with turbulent zones and rigorous science, but now it's time to dive into a world where anything is possible. Atlantis Classical Building. Our first stop is Atlantis, the legendary island whose sunken technologies, as mystery lovers claim, still stir the waters of the western Atlantic, causing ships and planes to vanish as if in some ancient magic trick. This idea is rooted in ancient texts, prophecies, and bold fantasies that we will now break down. Atlantis first appears in Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BC. The Greek philosopher described it as a powerful civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, that is, beyond Gibraltar, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. According to him, it was an island with advanced technology, a huge fleet, canals, golden walls, and temples, until the sea swallowed it in a single day due to the wrath of the gods. Fantasy writers seized this plot and tied it to the western Atlantic. They claim Atlantis lies somewhere beneath the Bahama Banks, and its sunken machines, be they energy crystals, electromagnetic emitters, or even anti-gravity devices, are still active. In the 1920s, the American psychic Edgar Cayce added fuel to the fire. He claimed to have seen the ruins of Atlantis near Bimini in his visions and predicted their discovery in 1968. And surprise, in that year, divers did indeed stumble upon the Bimini Road, strange stone slabs under the water off the island of North Bimini. Enthusiasts immediately declared them remnants of an ancient civilization. In the 1970s, divers began reporting pyramids on the seabed near the Bahamas. An expedition in 1977, led by American explorer Ari Marshall, allegedly discovered an underwater structure 40 meters tall off Cay Sal Bank with smooth faces resembling Egyptian pyramids. These discoveries inspired theories that these were Atlantis's power stations, emitting waves that disrupt compasses and engines. Science, however, is skeptical. Geologists studied the Bimini Road in the 1980s and concluded that it is natural beach rock, formed by tidal currents thousands of years ago, with no trace of human handiwork. The pyramids off Cay Sal also turned out to be questionable. Divers found no signs of stone tooling, and Marshall's photos sparked debate. While enthusiasts attribute magnetic malfunctions and disappearances to Atlantis, there is, alas, no proof, only speculation. The idea of extraterrestrial involvement in the mysteries of the western Atlantic began to form in the mid-20th century. By the 1950s, magazines featured the first stories of strange objects in the sky, glowing orbs and disc-shaped silhouettes spotted over the ocean. However, the real surge of interest came in the 1970s when rumors of abductions and eyewitness testimonies peaked. People began to say that aliens were using this stretch of the Atlantic as a zone for their operations, perhaps taking ships and planes for study or experiments. In 1972, the captain of a merchant vessel reported 3 orange lights hovering over his ship off the coast of Florida. In 1974, diver Robert Palmer described seeing a glowing, disc-like object rise from the water and fly into the sky while diving near the Bahamas. In 1975, a fisherman from Bermuda claimed a silvery object hovered over his boat, after which he lost consciousness and woke up hours later 20 miles from his original location. In his 1974 book The Bermuda Triangle, author Charles Berlitz suggested that the triangle is a cosmic pathway where aliens conduct their operations, and the lack of wreckage is explained by their advanced technology. The scientific community is skeptical of these ideas. Neither NASA nor the Navy has ever recorded material traces of an extraterrestrial presence in the area. Larry Kusch, in his 1975 book The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, pointed out that glowing orbs could be meteors, ball lightning, or St. Elmo's fire. Without physical evidence, this theory remains a fantastic proposition. Time warps and electronic fog hourglass not done. Temporal anomalies are a hypothesis that suggests the laws of time may be distorted in this region, carrying ships and planes into other dimensions or eras. One of the most famous cases supporting this version is the flight of Bruce Jernon in 1970. On December 4, 1970, Jernon, an American pilot, flew from Andros Island in the Bahamas towards Palm Beach, Florida, in a small plane. A few minutes after takeoff, at an altitude of 3,000 meters, about 10,000 feet, Jernon noticed a strange cloud ahead. He described it as a gray tunnel with sharp edges, swirling walls, and flashes of light inside. Soon, his aircraft was enveloped. Visibility dropped to 0, and his instruments, compasses, altimeter, and radio began to malfunction, with needles spinning erratically. The most unusual thing happened next. After what he estimated was about 3 minutes, the plane broke out of the cloud, but he was over Miami, 100 miles from Andros. The flight, which should have taken 45 minutes, was completed in just 27, and he had more fuel left than expected. Jernon claimed that the radar in Palm Beach registered his sudden appearance without any trace on previous sections of the route. He called this phenomenon electronic fog and suggested he had encountered a time warp. Science, however, questions these ideas. Meteorologists suggest a rare atmospheric phenomenon, like a strange type of turbulence or a mirage. Physicists note that creating time warps would require energies on the level of black holes. Without scientific evidence, independent observations, or physical traces, this version remains a fantastic assumption. The reality check, statistics and expeditions. So, is the Bermuda Triangle truly unique? A statistical comparison with other dangerous maritime regions helps put its reputation in perspective. The Bermuda Triangle covers about 1.5 million square kilometers. Over the 20th century, around 50 major ships and 20 aircraft were recorded as lost. Annually, thousands of vessels and hundreds of flights pass through this busy corridor. Let's compare this to other regions. The Dragon's Triangle, Pacific Ocean, near Japan. Over a similar period, Japanese maritime archives count about 40 lost vessels. This area is plagued by typhoons and underwater volcanoes. Cape Hatteras, U.S. East Coast, known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic, it has seen over 1,000 shipwrecks in 400 years due to treacherous shoals and storms. Sable Island, off Canada. This graveyard of the North Atlantic has claimed 350 ships in 300 years due to shallow banks and dense fog. Larry Kusch calculated that the percentage of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is no higher than that of other busy sea lanes. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, about 100 large ships were lost worldwide annually in the 20th century, with only 5 to 6% of those occurring in the Triangle. With modern technology like satellites and GPS, incidents in the triangle have dropped to just 2 or 3 per year since the 1990s, comparable to other regions. Underwater expeditions. Water wave. Since the mid-20th century, researchers have tried to find wreckage on the seabed. In 1986, a National Geographic expedition discovered the wreck of the SS Cotopaxi, a cargo ship that vanished in 1925 off the coast of Florida. In 1991, Robert Ballard, discoverer of the Titanic, found some small metallic and wooden debris but nothing indicating major wrecks from the famous cases. In 2015, a NOAA expedition with the deep-sea vessel Okeanos Explorer surveyed the seabed off Puerto Rico, finding only natural structures. These efforts highlight the difficulty of the task. Wreckage, if it exists, is likely swept away by currents or buried under sand and silt. NOAA data shows that less than 10% of the triangle's floor has been thoroughly mapped. Modern technology, sonar and drones. Satellite. Sonar and underwater drones have become key tools in exploring the seabed. In 1987, an expedition using sonar reportedly found wreckage of a Douglas DC-3 that disappeared in 1948 at a depth of 100 meters. However, such finds are rare. The Bimini Road, first discovered in 1968, was re-examined with sonar and drones. A 1997 U.S. Geological Survey study concluded it is a natural limestone formation, shaped by tides over thousands of years. Data from sonar and drones are stored in NOAA and USGS archives. They emphasize that discoveries in the triangle are either rare wreckage from known shipwrecks or natural geological features. Conclusion. So, what remains of the Bermuda Triangle legend when the facts take over? Science has provided answers to many questions, but has it left room for new mysteries? Statistics have revealed that the number of disappearances in the triangle is not higher than in other busy maritime zones. Underwater expeditions and modern instruments have shown that wreckage is rare. The seabed is more often empty than full of traces. NOAA and the U.S. Coast Guard note that the vast majority of losses, around 80%, are linked to weather, crew error, or technical malfunctions. Larry Kusch argued in his book that the triangle is a manufactured mystery that grew out of sensationalized stories. Modern data confirms that since the 1990s, the number of cases has dropped significantly thanks to satellites and improved communication. Science views the triangle as an ordinary stretch of ocean, but its legend continues to live on, leaving space for reflection.